Hey there folks, so in this video what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at how we can use our sprites into Flipbooks, how we can start combining all these different individual frames of an animation to make a Flipbook animation file that we could then use potentially as the moving element of our character, or potentially putting Flipbooks into the world. So if we wanted a tree that had, swaying leaves, we could do that, and it wouldn't just be this static sprite anymore like these fellas that are all just standing here in this sample scene right now. So how do we go about doing that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Warrior Simple folder here, and you can see I've got all of these different elements for this attack. And what I can do is I can select all of these, and you'll see that I've been very clever with my naming conventions of these. Unreal knows how to do a lot of this stuff because of the naming conventions. So for example, the fact that I've got the repeating name, attack 1, and then the numbers, it knows that that's going to determine a sequence. It knows that these things are all related to each other. So to make this nice and easy, I'm just going to right click, create Flipbook. And when I do, it adds one for me. I like to just get rid of this and maybe change it to something else. So maybe something like Flipbook FB underscore, but you can always obviously get a lot of mileage out of what works for you. And you can see it's already animating. It's already changing. And if we open this up, what you'll see is it's taken all of those sprites that we just had, it's put them into a sequence, and it's playing them out. It's playing it very, very quickly because it plays by default at 15 frames per second. So maybe I want to play around with this and slow this down. So you can see 8, a little bit more of a kind of considered slash. It's not just this really super quick one. I'm not going to tell you what specific number this might need to be. It might be that your animator and artist has designed these specifically to run at a particular frame rate. It might be that you have a particular frames per second that your project is running at with all of these kind of animations. And it might be that on certain animations you need to speed them up or slow them down in order to get the effect that you want. The keyframes bit underneath, you can see, has multiple indexes, multiple array elements, and each one of these is basically letting us go, okay, well, this is the sprite that we're going to use here, and it's this attack 1, but that should be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you can see here again, if I come down 0, 1, 2, and 3, it's taken my naming conventions with the numbers and it's used those to help us out. Now, frame run, if I take that frame run and I just change that up a little bit, what you can see now is I can actually change the length that some of these frames are going to run at. So previously you might have had to throw lots of the exact same ones in there. With this, what we can do now is we can say, I want this one, but I want to maybe just loop on the same frame just a little bit longer. Yeah, and that's really great for things like the animation, where maybe we want to have a little bit of anticipation and preparation of it. We're pulling back that sword, and then the swing, the actual attack, is maybe a little bit longer, and then the follow-up after maybe slows down a little bit. This is the bit where we're going to do our attack, our actual kind of, doing our damage, but we can mess around with these values so that we can control how much of each one we do. So I'm just going to change these back to 1, 1, 1 just for a moment, just to show you, and you can see how that's, it's an alright animation, but playing around with these, we can get a completely different feel to the power of this. Yeah, how slow should he swing his sword? Well, this one, it's obviously just the slash moment. I don't really want to have that left out in the world too much. There's also another thing to think about, which is how many times it's on these frames. Each of these frames could potentially be triggering other functionality with notifies to happen. So if I had this one as the one where it was triggering the notify, potentially I'm going to run that notify multiple times each time this runs. We'll see. We'll put that into our animation systems in a bit, and I'll show you how to use those notifiers for the exact moment in an animation that you want. But for now, you can see frames per second, all the different options we've got here. The default material is something that I like to point out, because when we create the flipbook, it defaults and goes, the default material is now going to use this one. Well, what about if I've been using something like the translucent one? So you can see here, I take maybe some of these ghoul ones. Let's take this one where he explodes, which is all of these, and create a flipbook from them, and go in there. You can see that that one has now changed to masked. Obviously, that's a little bit of a problem, because what we've done is say all of these sprites, when we've set them up, have been on the translucent, but by creating the flipbook decides, no, my default should be the masked one. So what we might need to do here is just make sure that obviously we're using the correct one. So translucent unlit, put that one back on, and now you can see I do have the actual translucency still coming through. The other thing that you have is that by default, when we create our sprites and we're working on our sprites, so I'm just going to go and have a look at, let's, for example, go and have a look at attack and attack 1. So we'll look at the sprite. The sprite has collision, and you can see the collision presets by default is set to block all dynamic, and we'll talk about collision in a separate video later. But for now, the thing I want to point out is that this is set to block all dynamic, but when we create a flipbook, it changes the flipbook to have no collision. So that's going to be important, because if I wanted to take this flipbook and just take it and add it into the world just on its own as it is, like this, yeah, now this is a flipbook, it is animating, but it has no collisions on there. So that tree that might be swinging in the wind, it's not actually having that anymore. Now, why does it do that? Well, the reason is that this might be getting bigger, it might be changing size, it might be getting smaller, so it defaults to say no collision. And then if you do want to keep some collision on there, you're going to have a bunch of different options. And the reason for that is that you're going to have to say, do I have my collision use the first frame's collision? Well, the first frame is the first sprite, so in this instance, it would say that this is the collision for the whole thing, which means even though this one here gets bigger, we look at the differences between these, look at the edit collision, even though this one gets bigger, it will still use this one as the core collision. Or we can say that each one of them uses each frame, which is obviously going to be, if we're looking at that, a much heavier thing. So this setting is not recommended. It's very expensive, because we're basically recreating that collision, setting up that collision every single frame. And when that's running 8 frames or even 12, 15, 16, whatever frames per second on every single one of our sprites, it's definitely a problematic issue. So we're probably going to be very careful on using the each frame one. If we're at that instance, if we're having to do something like that, then maybe we should use it dynamically with some kind of blueprint system to change it. And we just go with, okay, what is the simplest collision that we can put on here? Let's use maybe the first frame and define it from there. Okay, so I'm going to put that as no collision for now. And the other option that you can see is we've got this plus. So you can add and edit and add in your own animations in here. You can edit these around. You can move these options around if you need to. So you can see I can extend this out to extend out the frame run. I can add new animations in. So maybe I want to have it where it does an animation, then another animation as part of it. I can just combine and put all those things in. Now, the last thing I want to show you, because this is pretty much how the Flipbook stuff works, and you can leave it at that, but the last one I want to show you is just how intuitive Unreal can be when it comes to making all this. So here in this Heroes folder, in my sprites, you can see I have all of these, and there's actually 78 sprites in here. And that sounds like it's going to be a bit of a tedious job. And you think about this one, I've got to go through, select these, create Flipbook. Go through these, select these, create Flipbook. It's not that long of a job to do, but it is repetitive. Now, if you have good naming conventions, and I know I keep on stressing this as a thing, but if you do, you see here with attack down and attack up and each of the numbers and so on. Well, if I take all of these and right click and go create Flipbook, you can see that Unreal recognizes these. So attack down, attack right, attack up, attack down, dash end. It goes through every single one of them with the different names, and it creates a Flipbook for each one. Now that's brilliant because it's taken the number off of it. It's created that, and the only thing that I would need to now change is just change the SPR to a Flipbook prefix. But I now have all of these, and even going from that and going Flipbooks, I can now come into here and probably need to add those filters that I had earlier back in, but I can now take all of those, put them into a Flipbooks folder, move them all in there, and there are all of my Flipbooks now created. So you can see each of the individual animations for all of the different things my character can do. You can see there's a little bit of an issue where the pivot is broken, where one pivot is working and the other one isn't. That's why we need to go and make sure all the consistent pivots. None of these seem to have any of those issues. And the only thing that you might want to have a look at is any that are like idle, you see here. Rather than this looping this same animation 15 times a second, you might even want to just change that off. So maybe it's just a 1. And it just loops it around every frame, or 0 that it doesn't change. But obviously there, now you can see I have a whole range of these, and if I just go through every single one of these animation things that I've got, so for example the attacks, the guards, the idols, for whatever character I'm running, what we'll end up with at the end of that is the texture that we brought in, the sprites for each of the individual frames of animations, the flipbooks for each of those animations, and we should be ready to then start creating characters and making all of this functional. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.